All right, guys. Welcome aboard for the Mac Forum weekly Sunday video chat, June 5th, 2016. Hope that you enjoy the show. It's going to be another one of those really quick, sort of gas and go kind of things. If you're in the racing world, that's just a really quick pit stop, and that's probably what this one's going to be. Um, do have quite a bit of information for you. Tonight, we're going to try to roll through it pretty quickly here. First of all, hope that you enjoyed your weekend. I took the weekend off last weekend, and we're back now. So let's get right into things. First of all, welcome to our newest member, Colin Madu, and welcome to all the new members that have joined in the last couple of weeks while we had a little hiatus here and there. Second of all, let's get right down to the forum roundup. And it's just a real quick reminder before we go through the threads. Uh, if you are interested in asking a question in the forum, you'll need to go ahead and register, become a forum member. You don't need to be a member to lurk and read the answers to questions. Keep in mind that basic membership is free. If you'd like to support the forum, check into our premium membership. You'll find some links to that information on the forum main page as well. And let's get right into things. First of all, uh, excuse me for a sec, my notes are a little out of whack, but let's go right into this one. This is something that caught my attention a while back. Sometime last week, I was able to kind of figure this out a little bit, and I wanted to mention it just in case you're running into this problem. Forum member Dave R. has noticed that in some instances, the desktop options in system preferences, when you go into the desktop and screensaver options, if you're in the desktop section, on some of the pictures you see a drop down menu that has items like center and tile and fit to screen. And on other pictures, you do not see this. Initially, some members thought this might be a problem with El Capitan. As far as I can tell, it's not. I've seen this menu before in previous versions of OS 10, and I set about to try to figure out what the pattern was as to why it appears in sometimes and not in others. And here's the best that I can figure out. I haven't been able to 100% verify this, but it works on my system. I've tested it numerous times. Haven't found a document yet that verifies it. If you are using one of the Apple provided desktop patterns, such as the Yosemite background or some of the previous versions, the El Capitan background, any of those plain desktop patterns that Apple provides, you will not see that drop down menu. If you, on the other hand, go to your hard drive and pick out a graphic that you have, say a family photo or something of that nature, and put that in there as an option, then you will see these options for tiling, etc., etc., etc. I think this is because the Apple graphics are already fit to the size of the screen, whatever model you are dealing with. So, in other words, if you have a MacBook Pro, 13-inch, the pattern is going to be optimized for that. You have a 27-inch iMac, the pattern is going to be optimized for that. But when you have a customer provided option, you don't know what size that photo is going to be in. So you need some way to adjust it, rearrange it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's what's causing that difference, why some people see that and some people don't. Also, another one that's come up in the forum Forum member Goody Fourpaws has started a thread about scamware and ransomware. For those of you that are not familiar with this, scamware is the kind of thing where you see a pop up as you're browsing the web. It could be Safari, it could be any of the web browsers. You see a pop up and it says your Mac may have been infected. Sometimes it just says your computer may have been infected. To help in removing this, if you need help in removing this, please dial, and it gives you a certain number. When you dial that number, you're then asked to provide them with information to make a payment, and the amount of the payment varies from a few dollars to hundreds of dollars. Uh, the thing that I want you to keep in mind about this is two things. One, I tend to refer to these as scamware slash ransomware. First of all, because there is such a thing as actual ransomware, predominantly on the PC side, where your data is locked up and encrypted, and to get it back, you have to deal with whatever hacker infected your system. They generally will demand a payment of a certain amount of money in exchange for unlocking your system. And we saw earlier this year, just a few months ago, a similar thing popping up with one of the BitTorrent clients that may have been uh, legit in some way. Most of the time on the Mac side, it's complete and total scamware. Your data is not locked. It's simply a browser window that has popped up. What's happened is you've gone either to a site that's infected, or that site has an ad coming from a site that's been infected, and it pops up that screen in your on your browser. And many people will be frightened by this and call to get it removed. If you are not really familiar with this class of malware, and it's not a virus in the true sense of the word, it's browser based malware, particularly on the Mac side. If you are not really familiar with this, I encourage you to read through the thread that was started by member Goody Fourpaws, and in particular, forum member Randy B. Singer has an article in Tidbits describing this type of malware and how to get rid of it on the Mac. It's an excellent overview of the general idea of scamware slash ransomware. It doesn't get bogged down into the hyper technical type language. So even if you are not tech savvy, if you don't consider yourself tech savvy, this is a good article to read. A lot of Randy's information, as usual, is very well thought out, well written, and this is no exception. All right. Another tip here that I want to point out as a result, this came as a result of something in the forum. Although my apologies, I do not remember which forum member or members started this particular thread. Um, if you have recently updated your operating system, when you moved to, particularly in 1011, to El Capitan, you may have discovered that iPhoto, which has been around on the Mac side for quite some time, as part of the base installation on a Mac, is not there. Well, let me correct that. It's there, but it's not the default image editing program anymore. It's still on the hard drive. You can still run it. It's been replaced by a program called Photos, which has many of the same functionalities, but it is laid out somewhat reminiscent of some of the uh, photo programs, photo editing programs for iPhone operating system for iOS. And if you're finding photos a little confusing, there is an article that I'm going to recommend that you read. It's not the one that I have been recommending to people in the past. I couldn't seem to find a link to that one. This is a rather extensive article on how to do various things in the Photos program. It's an excellent read if you are new to using Photos. And I suggest to you that what you may want to do, it's somewhat lengthy, but what you may want to do is just give it a quick glance through and then kind of bookmark it and go back to it as you need different things. It doesn't cover absolutely everything that Photos can do, but it's a really good start. All right, now let's move on to a couple of other things that didn't necessarily come directly from forum posts, but kind of have just been inspired by various things. In some cases, these are things that happened to me. In some cases, these are things that I stumbled on over on the internet recently and kind of bookmarked them because I thought maybe they needed to be discussed a little bit. Let's go ahead and keep right along going with the tips and tricks here. First of all, one for the iPhone, iPad users might find this helpful. If you use Notes, okay, which is the note taking program that's in the iPhone and iPad, you may find this very useful. I did not, I hadn't really given this a lot of thought. I'd seen this folder, but hadn't really given it a lot of thought until I stumbled on a Cult of Mac article where it says that if you deleted a note and you find after you deleted the note that you need that note back, okay, here's how you get after it. Here's how you get back to it. First of all, know that the iOS device notes application keeps recently deleted notes for 30 days. Now, this seems to be dependent on your being linked to an iCloud account. But if you are, those, when you look at notes, there's a way to get at notes that have been deleted within the last 30 days. I have a link to the directions, but essentially what you're going to do is open the notes application, tap the back arrow, and select recently deleted, and then edit. And it will show you notes that have been recently deleted from your notes application. I currently have about 50 in my list. If you then tap on a note and select it and move it to another folder, just move it somewhere else, then you get that note back and it's not uh, deleted. But keep in mind, you're limited here by time to 30, roughly 30 days max. So you'll want to do this if you need to recover a note. You'll want to do this as soon as you discover that you accidentally deleted a note. But it's good to know that that's an option. Uh, Keep that in mind. Store that one away. I'll have a link to the directions in the show note as usual, just because it's kind of easy to see that way. And also, here's another one for iPhone, iPad users finding the IMEI number of your iPhone. You can do that easily if you have the phone. There are some times when you might want to know that number. Each phone, each iPad has a different number. And what you're going to normally do is you're going to be able to go into settings, open general, and then click about, and you can find those numbers. Well, here's the problem. What do you do if you don't have your phone or your iDevice? It's really quite simple, assuming that you have been backing up your iPad, iPhone to iTunes. Here's what you do, you can still find that number. If you launch iTunes, go to Preferences, go to the Devices section, and in there you're going to find a list of the backups that you have of the iPhone or iPad backups. All right. When you hover over one of the devices, it will show you quite a bit of information, including the IMEI number. So that's something. Should you ever need it, that's a good way to get at that information, even if you do not have the actual device with you. But of course, it's kind of contingent on you having backed up your device to iTunes. There's an article that I'll link to in the notes, and it has some other ways of getting at this information, but they're all somewhat dependent on you having the actual device with you. All right. There are just a couple of other things that that have come up that I wanted to talk about, kind of more along the lines of news information. Okay, first of all, let's get right into um, one more little tip, though. Kirk, the iTunes guy, has a Macworld article that describes some ways to add your contact information to your iPhone, to your Mac, to your iPad, so that someone would know how to contact you in the event of you losing your device or having it stolen. You could engrave it on the back of the phone, for example. Some people don't want to do that because they think it destroys the look. You can set iPhone to show your contact card, but the problem with that is it shows all of your information, including information that the Good Samaritan might not necessarily need to know. So Kirk goes into a little bit of detail about how to essentially create a background screen that has your contact information on it, just the information that you would think that person would need. Um, for example, you could put a an email address on there so that when the lock screen opens up, someone who sees that lock screen would then see that contact information, see that email address. Something, for example, might say, if this item is lost or stolen, please contact uh, John Doe at uh, gmail.com, or whatever address you wanted to associate with it. The article has some other suggestions for iDevices and also for Mac. It's a very good description for something we don't always think about. One suggestion that I will make to you: if you use an email address for this purpose, choose something that you're going to keep for a long time. For example, if you were to change jobs, then an email connected to your old job might not be the best place to send that kind of an email to. You would want to send it probably to a Gmail account or an iCloud account or something like that, that's going to move with you as you progress forward. I have a couple of email accounts that um, periodically, although they get checked, it's not something I routinely route a lot of information to. And I need to go in and make some adjustments because they don't always check reliably when I run mail. So that wouldn't be the kind of account that I would pick for this. I would pick something like a Gmail account or iCloud, even if you're using something like Yahoo Mail or any of that. You get the idea. It needs to be an account that you either check regularly or you forward to somewhere else, and it needs to be something that with a provider that's pretty reliable. Uh, and then also, just along the Mac news information, just before we wrap things up, there's a couple of things I want to mention in the kind of newsy section of things tonight. First of all, the speculation about an updated MacBook Pro is running rampant. Cult of Mac has an article about some things that lead them to believe that an update to the MacBook Pro line will be coming sometime later this year. Two things that they seem to think will be coming that may upset some users is the shift from standard USB 3 ports to the USB C connector used on some other um, MacBook MacBook Pro laptop models. So that's one of the things that's being speculated about. The other one is the use of an OLED trackpad. I'll have a link to that article. Yes, I know it's speculation. It's an interesting read anyway. I don't normally link to those kinds of articles, but it is an interesting read. They also have on Cult of Mac something that gives you the impression that they're expecting the iPhone 7 to have wireless charging capability. Um, I don't know if that would be enough to talk me into buying an iPhone 7, but I certainly can see why people would be interested in it if it were built in. Of course, uh, there hasn't been an official announcement about an iPhone 7. I wouldn't expect that to happen until at least WWDC, which is coming up soon. Um, and if an iPhone 7 is going to appear, notice I said if, it probably will, but if an iPhone 7 is going to appear, it would probably not occur before October, November of this year. But the speculation is that one of the features that it would have is wireless charging capability. I'm not going to rush right out and mortgage the farm to try to buy one. I prefer to wait and see what the capabilities are. And then as I start drooling over the new Apple Gear, that's when my wife forces me to show a little bit of restraint and say, no, we cannot spend your entire paycheck on new iPhones and new Macs and forget it. You don't need an iPad Pro, that kind of thing. But it's, it would take a lot to convince me to shift iPhones. Wireless charging in and of itself wouldn't do it, but it's an interesting idea. It's kind of nice not to have a charging cable with you all the time. There are some devices out there that essentially do wireless induction charging that you can use. The last time I looked at any of these, they were kind of expensive and certainly out of my budget. But it would be nice to see that included as a base feature in a future iPhone 7. And as usual, there's probably going to be even more of that speculation as we get closer to the Worldwide Developer Conference. And speaking of which, just on that note, the week that the developer conference occurs, in lieu of my Sunday chat, I'll do one that night after the developer conference has been streamed. Because and I'll kind of give you a roundup, just like I did with the last media event. So be looking for that. I'll have more information for you about that as we get closer. And last but not least for this week, um, there's a communication professor named Kelly Burns from the University of South Florida. And she had an article in the Hacker News recently, which was discussing the prospect that Facebook was listening to all conversations that people have while an app is open in an effort to gather information that would allow them to target more relevant ads for products related to what they are talking about. I have a link to an article there in the summary, as well as to Facebook's response to her. Essentially, what she is suggesting is that under the right set of circumstances, what Facebook is doing is listening to the conversation. It's not so much that they're looking for anything incriminating as much as looking for patterns of things that it can then use that pattern of what you're talking about to target advertising that fits into those topics. Facebook says that is not exactly what they're doing. I have the article that I linked to has both her description of how she arrived at this conclusion and their responses to what it is that they are actually doing. That's a good site, by the way, if you want to know more about some of these tracking technologies that are being used now all over the web and in a variety of other things. Keep in mind that a lot of these services that we've come to depend on uh, to make things more convenient, make it easier to enter data, a lot of these things do depend on a certain level of tracking. When a piece of software goes to show you restaurants nearby where you are, you do a search for Chinese food and all the Chinese restaurants in a certain area pop up. It's because somebody knows where you are location wise. Uh, when you get certain ads, it's because somebody's figured out information about you that you may not realize that somebody has figured out. Why do you get an ad for a Chevrolet as opposed to a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes as opposed to a Rolls Royce? It's someone somewhere has information that gives them a rough idea of what your income level is, and that way they can target to what you might be interested in. If you go to a site and you buy certain things, uh, you're going to notice that when you go back to that site, they're going to show you related items. Some of the web search engines do more tracking than others. So if you're interested in that, that site, that hacker news site, is a good place to start reading. Don't get paranoid, but do kind of be familiar with what some of the technology is that's out there. And then also the last little bit of information I want to pass on to you is one more little tip that I want to squeeze in. I when I ran through the notes earlier, I missed this one. Um, Once again, Kirk, the iTunes guy, has a tip for making effective use of the sidebar in the newest releases of iTunes 12. So if you've got the current release, they've done some things to navigation in iTunes to try to make it a little easier. And Kirk, the iTunes guy, has some information there that you might find helpful. Finally, just one last thing before I wrap up for the evening. Look for over the course of the summer a few things that I'm going to try to revamp the show just a little bit, add a few more things that might be interesting. We'll include sometimes, uh, as I can get these shot and produced pretty quickly, some just real quick screencast type things where, in addition to whatever video, normally you'll see video for me, but you'll also see video demonstrating some of the tips in this show. I'm working on that to see how quickly I can get those shot and produced, and see if I can get them done in a timely manner. And we'll introduce those because sometimes it really does help to see something being done as opposed to simply having it described. And also, as I say, we're going to be keeping an eye out for all the Apple developments coming out of the Worldwide Developer Conference. And I'll put out a show schedule for that day. Look for a summary show probably that same day, later in the evening. So the event will wrap up somewhere in the noonish, one-ish time frame, my time. And my goal is to have something out later that afternoon or early evening. So 6, 7 o'clock, same day as the developer conference. I did that last year. It was a little bit of a challenge, but it was kind of nice to do. I'd like to do that again this year. And that's going to just about do it for this week. Um, I'm keeping an eye out, waiting for the NBA championship to start, and looks like I'm going to be wrapping up the show just a little bit before the game starts. So that's going to do it for this week's tips and tricks. This is your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude on the forum. If you see me during the week in the forum and you've got an idea for something you'd like to see added to the show, send me a PM or post it in the. If you look at the community announcements section of the forum, there's one that says Mac Forum Sunday Chat. And if you'll just post it in that thread, you'll find it. And that's where the show notes will be. So as soon as I get those up, they will probably go up sometime tomorrow. And you'll find a link here that will link you right back to the notes and a little bit on everything that we've talked about. And until next week, I've been glad to bring this show to you this evening, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next week, guys.